Dan, welcome.
Hey, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. Just doing a show here, Dan. We were just talking about some of the guys who might have helped or hurt themselves last night in that NCAA title game relative to the NBA draft. Give me a couple of guys who you think helped themselves, and give me a couple of guys who you think might have hurt themselves, if at all.
Yeah, I don't think you can go based on just sort of a game or a weekend. I don't think that that's really the way it works because we've got a lot of information, I think, on all of these guys. So it's hard for me to, pinpoint anyone. I mean, you could look at the Okafor kid last night, and you could say, yeah, he didn't play that well, and he didn't. He pretty much got dominated by Kaminsky in every facet, but, the kid's also 18 years old. So I think you have to be very careful about putting too much stock into one game. It didn't really go his way in terms of the foul trouble. So I just am very, very cautious about reading too much into one performance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Dan, I think you make a great point. We were talking earlier today and before the show went on the air about Kaminsky totally outplayed, but he also played 39 minutes, and Okafor played 21. It was, as you mentioned, in foul trouble. That it's like a pro. It's almost, Dan, like a pro day in college football. Oh yeah, boy, he's going to jump up 18 spots because he played against no defense. Winston, of course, looked great. So I mean, you're absolutely right. There's not a question in there, but you're absolutely right that you can't just take one game. But who do you think helped himself? We were talking about Joseph Young, who was out of the tournament earlier, and a person like Decker helped himself, it would seem, during the NCAA tournament. Are there other guys, or do you agree that?
Yeah, there's no question that Decker had a really good tournament. He didn't play last night either, or played very well last night. He went 0 for 6 from the three-point line. I'm not. But again, we've seen this guy throughout the season, and he's been really, really good. He's a tough matchup at 6'9". He kind of reminds me a little bit of a Chandler Parsons type guy. I think he could be that kind of guy at the next level. So, I'm just real. I'm just real cautious about a guy who didn't play well last night. I think the R.J. Hunter kid, Georgia State. It's funny. I watched the way they used him in that game against Baylor, and I was a little bit baffled. I know that Baylor was sort of playing a box and one, and that was my first really good look at Hunter, and I'd been hearing about him as a potential first-round guy, and I just thought he was. To me, it was just strange, sort of how they used him. They didn't really run a lot of stuff for him. They didn't run anything through him. So, he ends up scoring 12 of the final 13 points in that game, and was amazing hitting that shot at the end. But I don't know. I just didn't necessarily see it. But he certainly helped himself. I mean, if you win a game like that by yourself, people are going to take notice, and obviously he's coming out. And I think he's probably going to be a first-round pick, too.
Hey, Dan, after the game, Bo Ryan of Wisconsin was bitching about the officiating. Didn't seem to come off very well. Do you think he had a case, or do you think it was just sour grapes?
I think you have to walk away from that one, don't you? I mean, we all saw what happened, right? I mean, it was a little bit of a, it was a typical Duke. The people who think Duke gets all the calls. Well, they got all the calls last night, right? But you still got to walk away from it. You can't be complaining after the game. It's just not a good look.
Well, you're tied at halftime. You had a 9-point lead. You have their best player on the bench. You only got called for 2 fouls in the first half. You had their guys in trouble then. You got to take advantage of the situations you have, it seems to me, and yet he wants to complain about the refereeing. Well, let's complain about the refereeing. Boy, if I'm Kentucky, I'm still complaining about the refereeing and the call that Wisconsin got. It just evens out. Even if it's bad officiating, it evens out, Dan. Is that true, or am I on the wrong track there?
Well, yeah, no, they did get a break. That basket in the semifinal game came after the shot clock. No question about it. They got a break on that. And the other thing you have to remember, when Duke got back in the game, it was a 9-point game. They made the run to basically tie it with Okafor on the bench. So I think Wisconsin sort of fell apart a little bit once the pressure went way up, and they had an opportunity to really step on Duke's throat, and they didn't do it. So I agree with you. I mean, there were a couple calls that I thought were very iffy, but I felt like Duke really outplayed them, and frankly has more talent.
Dan, I told this to Les the other day that it was odd for me. Wisconsin, going into the Kentucky game, kept saying, "We want Kentucky. We want Kentucky." It almost seemed like they were worn out in the second half last night because, okay, you got Kentucky, you beat them, but you should have maybe thought about you were going to face them in the semifinals, not the finals. Because
I would have wanted Michigan State, frankly.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they certainly spent a lot of energy and a lot of emotion on Saturday, but I still think that they had a great opportunity. I mean, they're up 9 points with 13 minutes to go. With that kind of experience, they should close it out and win the game. It just didn't happen for them. I mean, I do think that you have to look at the fact that Duke, it was anybody's game with 4 minutes to go. It was a tie game. Wisconsin took the lead there briefly, and then Duke scored on 4 straight possessions.
I want to ask, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I mean, Duke scored on 4 straight possessions, hit a couple big threes. They absolutely won the game when it was there for either team to win.
And especially when they came back from 9 points, they brought a guy in off the bench that people go, what's he doing in the game? I have a question for both of you. To get ahead of this, which of those 4 schools has the best chance to be back in the Final Four next year?
Dan, you go first.
I would say Kentucky. Wisconsin is going to sort of rebuild. Duke is probably going to lose, 3 guys. They'll still be good, but I don't think they'll be anywhere this level. I think that you look at Michigan State, top 15 type team, but Kentucky's going to have as much talent as anybody in the country yet again. So I think you got to go Kentucky.
All right, Dan, I'm going to take the opposite tack. I'm going to go Duke. What people don't realize is, with all the talk about Kentucky and the 9 kids that are going to end up going to the NBA off that roster, Duke has 9 McDonald's All-Americans on their roster, and I love this kid, Grayson. What's his last name? Grace, I can't remember.
Think of Gracie Allen.
I love Gracie Allen. Good. All right.
That's what I was saying.
I love this kid, Grayson Allen, and they're going to have a lot of really good young kids coming back. And Dan, it's Krzyzewski, right?
He's the greatest. There's no question. He will have a great team next year. They got some good kids coming in. But I just, to be honest with you, I just don't think that they're going to have quite the same level of elite talent. I mean, Okafor is this sort of once-in-a-generation type of guy, allegedly. And Jones, I don't know if he's going to come back or not. I think, winning last night, they sent him into the draft. So we'll just have to see. I just don't think they're going to be Final Four here.
Yeah. It's kind of an interesting question because Tom Izzo just keeps getting back to the Final Four. You could almost line up the 3 of us and 2 other guys, and Izzo's going to be at the Final Four. That's why kind of interesting. Kentucky's going to change as many as 7 players. You know that Duke's going to lose possibly 3 or 4 players off their team, and Wisconsin had its best run the last 2 years, even though they go to the tournament every year. So I just Michigan State just looming out there, and you go, well, they're not very good. Well, they get to the Final Four more times than not. So.
Dan, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Just a few hours after the NCAA title was wrapped up. Dan Wolken of USA Today. We'll talk to you soon. And that segment brought to you by the Celtic Tavern, the official sponsor of the Colorado Rapids. The Celtic provides a free bus to every Colorado Rapids home game and tailgate 2 hours before kickoff, and they're located just 2 blocks west of Coors Field on Blake.